ain't gonna stop me from cripping. It's easy to crip to me.
Welcome to Boys in the Hood TV. Today we're tapping into the streets of LA, and we're gonna be talking about the Park Compton Crips versus the neighborhood Compton Crips and the Palm and Oak Gangster Crips. Now the Park Compton Crips, their hood sits on the east side of Compton, around Alondro to Greenleaf Boulevard. They've been known to beef with many rival hoods like Luda Park Pyrus, Atlantic Drive, Neighborhood Compton Crips, and many others. But on the flip side, Park Compton Crips is cool with the Acacia Block Crips, Carver Park Crips, and a few others. Now the Neighborhood Compton Crips are from the east side also. The Neighborhood Crips been known to beef with Kelly Park, Atlantic Drive, Nutty Block Crips, and a long list of other hoods. But the Neighborhood Compton Crips fall under the Deuce card, which is the Neighborhood Alliance. Now the Palm Oak Gangster Crips is from the east side of Lynwood, between Oak Street and Palm Avenue. Now Palm and Oak Crips are cool with the Santana Block Crips, the Compton Vadio Treces, and they beef heavy with the Mob Pyrus, Kelly Park, and the Neighborhood Compton Crips. But see, in the late 80s, we will see all three of these hoods clash in a violent war. On July 4th, 1988, a front hood Crip named Antonio Hill was gunned down near the Palm and Oak Hood area by members of the Neighborhood Compton Crips. Now at this time, the front hood Crips and Palm and Oak were on good terms. So this murder was not gonna go unanswered. 3 weeks after Antonio Hill's murder, on July 26, Park Compton Crip, Dario Downings, and Gary Brown went to a house in Lynwood owned by Tony Harris to visit friends. Now these friends included Monique Cook, Desiree Harris, and a few others. Later on that night, Monique would receive a phone call from a Palm and Oak Crip by the name of Gwen McElroy. Now Gwen's boyfriend was Antonio Hall, who had just been shot and killed 3 weeks ago. During this phone conversation, Gwen would ask Monique why she had neighborhood Crips over at the house. Monique would respond and say, "There are no neighborhood Crips here." But Gwen refused to believe her. Gwen then stated that her homeboys was on the way. So that's when Monique threatened that she would come over to Gwen's house to fight her one-on-one. After this phone conversation, Monique would go outside to go in her car to go meet up with Gwen to fight. Also behind her was Harris, who stood in the driveway, when suddenly out of nowhere, two cars pull up, a Cadillac and a Chevy Chevette. A group of Palm and Oak Crips hopped out both cars, which included Stanford Bryant and a man by the name of Calvin Jackson. Right off the back, Bryant asked Harris where the neighborhoods was at, and she immediately replied, "There ain't no neighborhood Crips here." Calvin Jackson and another Palm and Oak Crip headed to the back of the house. As Monique continued to head to her car, Bryant would then follow her. And as Monique tried to open her door, Bryant would grab her and then slap her in the face and punch her with a closed fist. Meanwhile, inside the house, Park Crips, Dario, and Brown were in the bedroom near the back of the house talking, when suddenly Jackson from the Palm and Oak Crips would stick his head into the bedroom window and say, "Where the neighborhood Crips at?" And Dario would look at him and say, "Ain't no neighborhoods here. This Kelly Park." And Jackson will respond, "Fuck Kelly Park, it's Palm and Oak." After this quick exchange, Jackson put his head from the bedroom window and ran back down the driveway and ran into his car. He would grab an AK out the back seat. Witnesses would see Jackson running back up the driveway with the AK and start to yell out, "He got an AK, he got an AK." Now inside the house, Dario and Brown are talking about what they're gonna do if the Palm and Oak Crips come back up to the house. But before they can do anything, the back door was kicked open and Jackson stood there with the AK and started blasting. Gary Brown was hit multiple times in his back with one fatal shot directed to the back of his head as he collapsed on the floor. Brown would die at the scene. Dario, who was in the living room area, heard the shots and looked down the hall as he saw Jackson toting the AK with 3 other men, and he immediately ran out the front door. As Dario went outside, Palm and Oak Crip Bryant tried to grab him, but Dario pushed past him and Bryant began to chase after him. Dario jumped a nearby fence, but Bryant tried to hold onto his t-shirt, but somehow Dario was able to get loose and escape. Immediately, Bryant, Jackson, and the other Palm and Oak Crips got back into their cars and fled the scene. Now, not long after this shooting, Calvin Johnson and Stafford Bryant will be arrested and charged for this murder. Witnesses at the house would testify during the trial that they saw both Calvin and Stafford Bryant at the house the night of the shooting. The only person that would not testify will be Monique Cook, as she would state during the trial that she did not recognize any other defendants as individuals that was at the house the night of the shooting. And by the end of this trial, Stanford Bryant will be found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. Calvin Jackson will be found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years plus 2 years to life in prison. Now, Kelly Park and the neighborhood Compton Crips would eventually have a falling out, and a war would continue through the 90s all the way up to the 2000s. And on March 2nd, 2008, Kelly Park Crip Eric Dawson came home to witness his baby moms, Sharonda Craigs, arguing with two neighborhood Crips by the name of Anyo Austin and a man known by the name of Tank. They were arguing over parking space, which Sharonda Craigs had legal rights to. But immediately after getting out his car, Dawson inserted himself into this altercation and began arguing with Austin. Out of nowhere, another neighborhood Crip named Yawan Banks, aka U-Dog, would pull up and hop out the car and hand Tank a gun and say, "Get him, cuz." And after handing Tank a gun, Banks pulled out a strap from his waistline and started shooting. 35-year-old Eric Dawson would be hit multiple times and he would die at the scene. The neighborhood Crips would take off and flee the scene. After police would arrive and begin investigating, Sharonda Craigs would identify both Yawan Banks and Tank as the gunman from a photo lineup. Banks was described as a black man with cornrows. But nearly a month later, on April 9th, when Yawan Banks would be arrested, police soon realized that Banks did not have cornrows, which was given in the description by witnesses. But during the trial, prosecution submitted evidence showing back in May that when a female by the name of Lakeisha Crowder came to visit Banks, she had been busted by police officers. After receiving a piece of paper, which she was instructed by Banks to hide clothing and also lie about the timing of Banks getting his hair cut off. And after officers got this piece of paper, Lakeisha Crowder would be arrested right there during visitation. And by the end of the trial, neighborhood Crip Yawan Banks will be proven as the shooter, and he will be convicted and sentenced to 50 years to life in prison. Lakeisha Crowder would also be convicted to an accessory after the fact. Now, years later, on December 6, 2021, neighborhood Crip Andrew Bender went to a man house by the name of Michael Harrell, who's a mechanic who worked on cars. Bender needed his car fixed, so he headed over to his house. Now, Harrell's house was located in the Kelly Park hood. Shortly after arriving, both Harrell and Bender would head to pick up parts for the car, and as they were walking down the driveway, a known Kelly Park Crip by the name of Lawrence Stackhouse approached Bender. Stackhouse looked Bender in the face and said, "I heard you killed my father." Bender immediately responded and said, "I didn't kill your father, but I was in the car with the man that did it." Bender then went on to say, "That's my past. I don't want to talk about that no more." After they exchanged these words, Bender and Harrell would get into the car and head to the auto parts store. Once they arrived back to the house from the auto parts store, Bender and Harrell would notice that Stackhouse was still there. Stackhouse was standing in the driveway talking to a man known as Mr. In this moment, before walking away from the car, Bender would turn back around and grab his gun outside of the car and have it by his waist. Bender then would walk past Stackhouse in the driveway, mad dogging him as he headed to the backyard. Michael Harrell noticed the look in Bender's eyes and immediately ran inside the house and told Marlon Johnson, aka Big Zip, that they was about to have a problem outside. As Harrell came back outside, Harrell would tell Stackhouse to make sure that he watched his back. Stackhouse then would pull out a gun and looked in the backyard and said, "That man don't like me." Immediately, Stackhouse got into his Charger and drove away. Now, the next morning, Bender and Harrell were still at the house working on the car. At around 8:30, they heard the sound of a V8 coming down the street. And as they looked up, it was Stackhouse driving his Charger. Stackhouse would pull the Charger right in front of the house and hop out the car. Harrell noticed that Stackhouse had his gun out and was walking straight towards the backyard. Bender also noticed the gun, and Bender immediately took off running. And that's when Stackhouse aimed and started blasting. Bender would be hit once in his back as he stumbled, and then Bender would turn around with his hands up in the air. But Stackhouse continued to press towards him and shot him 3 more times. He would shoot him in the stomach and in the chest. Harrell would look at Stackhouse and say, "What the fuck are you doing, man?" And as Stackhouse walked away, he looked directly at Harrell and said, "You all right?" And then he got back into his Charger and fled the scene. Marlo Johnson, aka Lil Zip, came running out the house and saw Bender on the ground. Bender then told Marlo to grab his gun and start shooting. So that's exactly what Marlo did. So Marlo grabbed Bender's gun and he headed for the street, but Michael Harrell would stop Marlo from shooting. 911 was then called and paramedics would arrive and they would rush Bender to the hospital. Not long after, Bender would die during surgery. Now, 3 months later, Michael Harrell would talk to authorities and identify Kelly Park Crip Lawrence Stackhouse as a shooter. In the following year, August of 2022, Stackhouse would finally be arrested at his mother's house. The police would find a 9mm Ruger, a ski mask, a bulletproof vest, and some extra clips. They would also impound his Dodge Charger. Investigators would extract data from his GPS. The GPS would show his location at the time of the shooting, that he was in that area. Now, during Stackhouse's trial, his parents would come claiming that at the time of the shooting, Stackhouse was eating breakfast with them and that Stackhouse suffered a seizure on the floor and he was unable to leave the house. But even after this alibi that the parents tried to give for him, the prosecution had delivered and presented enough evidence, including multiple witness statements, and Stackhouse was found guilty of first-degree murder and possession of a firearm by a felon, and he was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison. I want to thank everybody for tapping in, and I'll see y'all next time.